If you got that reference, let me know. There's no prize, but you do get a congratulations. Congratulations. Okay, like millions of other people, I have been obsessed with Severance. I didn't watch season 1 when it first aired because I actually don't really watch that much TV. But since so many people have been talking about Severance over the past few months, I did take the bait earlier this year, managed to catch myself up to season 2 while it was still airing, and loved it. I mean, honestly, because I watched the seasons back to back, I did think season 1 was considerably stronger than season 2 in terms of like pacing and character development. But you know, it is really hard to make a show consistently amazing for the entire runtime, especially when you set the bar so high with the first season. And I think overall, it's still better than the majority of shows out there. So I still recommend it. If you haven't watched Severance yet, I'm not going to spoil it, but the basic premise is that at this fictional tech company, Lumen, some employees have elected to sever themselves, aka undergo a surgical procedure that splits their consciousness into an at-work persona and an out-of-work persona. So essentially, you don't know what you're doing at work, and your work brain has no idea what you do outside of work. And the trouble comes when we start to realize that Lumen is not as ethical as they seem. Surprise, surprise for a tech company. And the two personas have developed their own separate personalities and agendas. It's a mystery thriller, so it keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire time as you try to follow clues and figure out what the hell is happening at Lumen. I'm reminded of this tweet from Eric Baker about the show. It's so funny that Severance is succeeding by rediscovering the forgotten ancient knowledge that audiences enjoy it when things happen on the TV shows they watch. This is so true. Severance is such an engaging show because stuff actually happens every single episode. Like, don't get me wrong, I love character-driven, introspective stories as much as the next person, but I think it's just way more fun to build community and exchange predictions and theories when a TV show has a really good plot with like multiple twists and turns. It's literally just storytelling 101. And yet, a lot of prestige TV these days is not focused on crafting good stories. They just like solely rely on the acting talents of their cast and they call it a day. Thomas Flight hypothesized why writing tends to suffer. He said, when an audience looks at a trailer, they see the flashy costumes, set design, actors they love, crisp cinematography, or an IP they recognize. But you can't really judge the writing until you've already seen the film or show, and by then your money is already spent. Your money or your time, whatever the case, writing is where corners get cut. So in this seemingly dry creative climate, no wonder everyone is so amped up about Severance, a show where the writing feels very purposeful and where the concept is so strange and relevant and, dare I say, original, at least in comparison to everything else we see today. I've talked about IP usage a lot in Hollywood, across numerous videos, but it's not just that. Everything these days feels like a reference to something or a copy of something else. And no, it's not all nefarious. It's just like really mostly boring. Many music artists these days lean on samples. Numerous microtrends circulate on social media every day, from sounds to outfits to language. And every publication seems to write the same kind of copy. Cool Girl Essentials, European Summer Starter Pack, Literary It Girl Beauty Hacks. Just like right now. Victoria Vasileva put this more on my radar when she published her essay, Reference Board Final Bosses and the Irony Epidemic. In it, she shines a spotlight on pop star Sabrina Carpenter, whose team has continuously selected red carpet outfits and editorial looks based on vintage red carpet outfits and vintage editorial looks. For example, the J.W. Anderson backless gown she wore to the Grammys recalls one of Shirley MacLaine's gowns in the 1964 movie What a Way to Go, pendant cascading down and all. Sabrina also referenced Madonna's 1991 look at the VMAs, wearing the same exact Bob Mackie dress. And actually, there's layers to this, Madonna's inspiration for the look was Marilyn Monroe, making Sabrina's outfit choice a reference of a reference. I mean, this is not only Sabrina either, it's an epidemic. Here are some other examples. Macaulay Culkin and Brenda Song's John and Yoko homage for Cosmopolitan. Rhode copying Versace's Fall/Winter 1994 campaign for the launch of their lip-shaped product. Even my beloved Challengers I Told You t-shirt referenced John F. Kennedy Jr.'s shirt from the 90s. I think some of these examples are better done and offer more interesting reads than others, like the Challengers costume design, but the point still stands. And before anyone says anything, I understand the complexities of having to be an artist today and how it's wrapped up in marketing and branding, but all of this has made me spiral a bit about what it takes to be original these days.
I just think that, like, if we are going to send people to space, it should be, like, normal people.
No, exactly. Like, rich people already live on the moon, basically. We should be sending public school teachers to space.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if they have, like, good enough insurance for that.
Wait, your hair looks really good in this lighting.
Oh my god, really?
Yeah.
Wait, okay, will you take a picture of me?
Yeah, of course.
I need, like a good Instagram photo. I kind of feel like my old coworkers at Jimmy John's is starting to forget about me.
I think you look really cute and you should definitely post this.
I don't know. I feel like it's gonna flop, you know? It doesn't really have, like, that.
Right. It's not like...
Yeah.
We need some inspiration. I feel like I just, like, need people to get it, you know?
Right, and they need to know that, like, we get it. Okay, what if I'm, like, jumping up on the couch like Tom Cruise on Oprah? People would get that.
What about, like, a Simpsons couch moment, but you'd have to be yellow?
Yeah. Okay, The Weeknd is on a couch in this music video. We can reference that. It could be like the, you know, like soft girl kind of thing. No, but I think we have some good ideas here.
So is the post doing well?
No.
I still feel the same, man.
What you feel is nostalgia and liquor.
Okay. Trends have always been around, right? In 2007, Jonathan Lethem wrote an essay for Harper's Magazine called The Ecstasy of Influence of Plagiarism. And in the essay, he discusses artistic appropriation across a number of genres: literature, music, visual art, etc. He mostly defends the practice, arguing that art doesn't exist in isolation and is inherently connected to and or influenced by past artists. For example, there's some contention about the origins of Vladimir Nabokov's novel Lolita, namely the discovery of a short story also called Lolita, written in 1916 by a man named Heinz von Lickberg. Von Lickberg's Lolita describes a middle-aged man who becomes obsessed with the preteen daughter of his landlord. Not too far off from Nabokov's story. However, von Lickberg became a Nazi and also was just a bad writer overall, and so has been happily forgotten in the sands of time. There's also not enough similarities between the two texts to, like, constitute plagiarism, but the question still remains, was Nabokov knowingly inspired by von Lickberg's idea? Another writer was clearer about his dubbed cut-up method. Beat writer William S. Burroughs was known to cut up snippets of other writers' texts and rework them to create new meanings. The purpose of the method was to disrupt conventional language patterns, which you can see in his novel, The Soft Machine. More obviously, Disney built their company's success on adapting classic works written by other people, from the Brothers Grimm's Snow White to Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. Which is why it's also painfully ironic that Disney is so protective over their own copyright. For example, in 1992, the company threatened legal action against artist Dennis Oppenheim for using Disney characters like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck in an unauthorized sculpture. You know, as I was thinking about Disney, as one does, when Disney started putting out their live action versions of their animated films, it did initially make me really sad because it made me think about how there's going to be a whole generation of kids who are growing up with Gal Gadot as their introduction to Snow White's evil queen.
Enough champagne to fill the Nile.
You know, then I was writing this. I was like, well, wait. My introduction to Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island is the Disney sci-fi adaptation Treasure Planet. And isn't that kind of the same concept? Growing up, I saw a diluted or adapted form before seeing its original. I mean, to this day, I still haven't read Treasure Island, but I've seen Treasure Planet like 15 times. I mean, Latham himself says he was born in 1961, and he was experiencing this in his childhood too. He writes, I knew monkeys before Beatles, Belmondo before Bogart, and remember the movie Summer of 42 from a Mad Magazine satire, though I've still never seen the film itself. So, to be clear, I'm not saying that it's an inherently bad thing to reference or be inspired by another artist. This has been the process of creating new art for centuries. And it's also not bad to be exposed to those distillations first either. Some of these distillations are actually good or even better than the original. Even author Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club, said in an interview, I was sort of embarrassed of the book because the movie had streamlined the plot and made it so much more effective and made connections that I had never thought to make. Dang. But Latham makes this caveat in his article, which I totally agree with. If I am right to say that where there is no gift, there is no art, then it may be possible to destroy a work of art by converting it into a pure commodity. What he means is this: art that moves us is a gift. When we might have to pay for a ticket to access it, if it's like a movie or concert, the art's purpose is for us. It's to establish a feeling bond, give us an emotional experience. In contrast, a really powerful advertisement can never be a gift because it's never for the person. Its purpose is to push a product. So a reference used in an art piece is not the same as a reference used in a commercial. I think what's made me kind of cynical about a lot of the referencing I've been seeing these days is that it is ultimately done to push a product. Like, I have no idea what Sabrina Carpenter's interests are. And I mean, I don't doubt that she is personally inspired by Madonna and Betty Boop or whatever. And I also really like her music. If you're standing her, don't hate me for saying this. I support her. At the same time, I think this pressure to constantly be relevant in the spotlight, to keep that momentum going as a pop star, colors some of these referential choices as easy ways to generate press and keep her name in people's mouths.
And the fact that she's picked up on the nanny and the nanny style is kudos to her, and I'm extremely flattered.
Reheating someone else's nachos, as they say. For example, Carpenter's Vogue cover that emulates Madonna's 1990 Jean-Paul Gaultier look was honestly kind of boring, and it didn't add anything new to the editorial art form in a Burroughs cut-up method kind of way. I mean, I think US Vogue covers have been consistently lacking in innovation for years now, but I digress. But this cover was sort of like a guaranteed press moment. That's why they went with it. Madonna herself is pretty online, and the team probably knew, or I wouldn't even be surprised if they mediated this to happen, but they probably knew Madonna and Sabrina would have some kind of moment acknowledging the reference, which would spur news outlets to write about how pop star girlies are paying tribute to the pop stars that preceded them, and what a show of positive woman supporting woman goodness, which actually ended up inspiring a Burberry campaign featuring the two of them together. Easy money. Even easier money that the JPG look is from the 90s, and as a society, we love the 90s. I mean, we love nostalgia in general. That explains why the 1977 Fleetwood Mac song Dreams went TikTok viral in 2020. Luminate actually published data that shows how old the songs were that people were listening to in 2024, and nearly 50% of song plays were from music that was at least 5 years old. So, why are we so nostalgic these days? We actually can look to the 1970s for an explanation, because that decade was actually pinned at the time as being intensely nostalgic. In 1974, the New York Times reported on the massive wave of nostalgia which had engulfed America over the past few years, with millions basking in the fascination of the good old days. As part of the 70s nostalgia wave, the antiques industry became a major enterprise. And yes, technically, buying secondhand has been a practice for much, much longer due to rationing, scarcity, economic downturn, et cetera, et cetera. But in the post-war era, an era of relative abundance in the US, antiques became collectibles. As historian Agnes Arnold-Forster reports in her book Nostalgia, A History of a Dangerous Emotion, by 1979, the prices of both antiques and collectibles had skyrocketed. A pair of Queen Anne chairs made in Philadelphia circa 1750 sold at Christie's auction house in New York for $176,000, 15 times what they would have fetched at the beginning of the decade. Similar to now, in the 70s, there was a revival of multiple different eras, the Jazz Age being one of the big ones. People wore cloche hats, long earrings, raccoon coats, hip flasks, revived the speakeasy, and engaged with 20s media. The musical comedy No No Nanette, which actually flopped in 1925, reappeared on Broadway in 1971 as a hit. But people were looking at other decades too. Actor George Spanky McFarlane experienced some renewed interest. He was originally famous for being in the 1930s and 40s comedy series Our Gang. And America Magazine also reported in 1975 that the Gilded Age was also becoming popular, with a number of new novels set in the 19th century. Arnold-Forster writes that during the 70s, the target for nostalgia had become so specific and seemingly arbitrary that there were even reports of a man from Iowa who was both miserable and lonely because he was nostalgic only for the 16-year stretch between 1752 and 1768. His frustration was that he could not find a single other person who shared his yearning for this particular period of time. Hey, if you're still out there and you're still loving that era, I'll be nostalgic for it with you. Europe also experienced this nostalgia wave too. People were revisiting the works of Damia and Vincent Scotto. The 1920 song Rue de la Joie, for example, circulated in a way not too similar to how people today are listening to Fleetwood Mac. On the flip side, there was also renewed interest in World War II memorabilia that had the Central Association of Jews in Western Germany warning about a possible Hitler nostalgia wave, especially following the success of a documentary about him. Some leftists believed that nostalgia went hand in hand with conservative values. One journalist for Tribune wrote, "It is part of the camp sensibility to prize its objects out of time, out of history, out of social processes, and then to hypostasize and venerate them. A politically conservative act. This intellectually flaccid surrender to nostalgia and masturbatory fantasy must be resisted at all costs by the left." Intellectually flaccid. I'm going to start saying that from now on. He has a point though. One of the biggest fascist dog whistles on X, which is already a major red flag of a platform all on its own, is a user with some kind of Greek statue icon and whose entire ethos is about how antiquity is better than modernism. But which traditional values should we be revisiting, sir? Answer quickly now. And notice it's never the gay sex part of Greek life that they want to bring back. Sociologist Fred Davis was one of the first to theorize on nostalgia, and he argues that because nostalgia is never a perfect reconstruction of the past, it actually tells us more about the present. Davis wrote in his book, Yearning for Yesterday, nostalgia's gaze looks backwards rather than forwards, for the familiar rather than the novel, for certainty rather than discovery. Alvin Toffler built on Davis's idea in his 1970 book, Future Shock, in which he argued that nostalgia was triggered by fear of change. I mean, it makes sense. The 1960s was a period of major change. Civil rights movements, environmental movements, the Vietnam War, etc. No wonder people were craving some kind of certainty amidst all this chaos. In comparison, today's modern life is rife with anxieties for the future. Climate change, technological dependence, AI art, egg prices, Gal Gadot's acting career. It makes total sense to me why nostalgia is on the rise. It reminds me of this tweet. Back in the day, there was so much toilet paper and so many eggs that we gathered at night and threw them at the houses of our enemies. Look, we've actually seen nostalgic movements even before the 70s. Nostalgia was actually considered once a medical condition, with people in the 17th century becoming violently ill after leaving their homes. But what made the 70s so special to me was capitalism. Davis called it the American nostalgia industry. An idea touched on in Mad Men in their famous episode, The Wheel, and one of my favorite episodes of TV ever. In the episode, creative director Don Draper explains the power of nostalgia when used in advertising. In his pitch to Kodak to sell their new product, The Wheel, he puts his own photographs into the device and narrates the experience of looking at them.
Nostalgia literally means the pain from an old wound. It takes us to a place where we ache to go again.
This episode hits so much harder if you follow along with the show because all the photos depict him being happily in love with his wife and being a present father. Meanwhile, we know that couldn't be further from the truth. And it's such a sad moment because we can see the recognition that Port of Dawn does ache for some kind of happy family life. But it conjures more nuanced feelings among us as we also realize he's exploiting his own memories for profit. So that idealized nuclear family may be impossible for a person like him. While Mad Men is a fictional show, what it reveals about advertising is true. As a real-life example, the 1973 Hovis commercial, Boy on the Bike, directed by Ridley Scott, featured some Victorian-era boy delivering a basket of bread to a baker. As Arnold-Forster explains, the explicitly nostalgic advert was designed to pull on the heartstrings of viewers to sell not just bread, but a portal to a bygone era. a time when loaves were home-baked and deliveries were conducted on bicycles, a world that, even in 1973, had already more or less disappeared in Britain. Now that you could profit off nostalgia, to my earlier point, we started to see references used not for art's sake, but for selling's sake.
I'll have what she's having.
I built a real-life Pinterest board.
I really wish you could click those.
Hypothetically, maybe, I wouldn't be so picky if references weren't so lazy. But I feel like almost every reference is recalling a major pop culture moment that everyone would know about, usually from the 90s and 2000s. And a lot of the times, it's a straight frame-for-frame copy. I think there's a few reasons for this over-reliance on 90s and Y2K pop culture movements. And unfortunately, the major thing is that it does work. The time period is popular because not only does it fit the criteria for collective nostalgia, it also fits the criteria for personal nostalgia. And the difference between the two nostalgias is collective refers to society at large, a desire for society to return to the past, whereas personal reflects ourselves, a desire to return to our individual past. On a personal level, many of us actually have memories from the 90s and 2000s. I read Alice Gregory's 2013 review of director Nicole Holofcener's work in The New Yorker by chance, since I saw it taken out of context on Tumblr. I've actually yet to see any of Holofcener's work because I'm a bad film person, but this section in the review I think is generally relevant to the point I'm making, so I'll read it. While pangs of recognition can be thrilling, novels set in your Brooklyn neighborhood, a reference to a bottle of sriracha in the fridge, scenes scored with your favorite indie band, it's intellectually disingenuous to allow that recognition to masquerade as some higher order of feeling. People love thinking about themselves, and getting someone to like something seldom requires much more than giving them the chance to celebrate their own personal history.
I don't always park in front of your house. I usually just drive by.
Sometimes I drive by your house too.
You do?
But we also have collective nostalgia for the 90s, right? As it's really the last period before smartphones took over, before social media ran rampant, and before our dependency on technology took a turn for the worse. Lindsay Turner, the daughter of the creators of the original That 70s Show and an executive producer of the spinoff That 90s Show, said that the 90s was the last time any real kind of engagement was possible, when you had to make your own fun and connect with other people. James Abraham points out a more practical reason. Everyone is cycling back to things that they might have seen or done because they are safe and tested. Speaking of safe and tested, I'm not sure when everyone started talking about mood boards, but it seems like they've become an integral part of the creative process for just about anyone who works in a creative field, and also for manifestors. There's a number of mood board curating platforms these days, Arena, Cosmos, Savvy, but by far the most popular is, of course, Pinterest. I like Pinterest, I do, but the algorithm has definitely gotten worse over the years. I feel like I get shown the same images again and again and again, and there's also been concern over AI slop that's been infiltrating the site. Maggie Harrison Dupre wrote a story for Futurism uncovering the AI creep on Pinterest, and as an example, she plugged in the search DIY shelving ideas, and when she zoomed in on some of the images that Pinterest pulled up, she noticed that a bunch of the books that were on these shelves had no actual titles. Also, a bunch of the links that were filtered to the top were from AI-generated blog posts. This is not just conjecture, by the way. This guy, Jesse Cunningham, actually makes YouTube videos about how to use AI to flood Pinterest results for profit. In his video, Brain Exploding Emoji, $10,000 a month using AI Pinterest, he explains, I'm talking $10,000 per month on Pinterest using AI images, using AI text. His process includes using ChatGPT to come up with and post ideas and URL slugs, and then he uses another AI platform called Content Goblin to generate articles and photos. Then he creates fake websites where he uploads those articles, and then he uses AI to generate click-worthy pins that will link to these fake articles. All of this adds to making Pinterest a more difficult place for sourcing interesting, genuine art. I also don't know how the algorithm works, but I'm assuming that the more popular images get pushed up to the top, meaning that every creative director is seeing the same images when they search, I don't know, Blue Mary Milk outfits. Mood boarding has also kind of made everyone into a creative director. You know, there's a reason why that job title has become so memeified to mean essentially nothing, because a ton of people have just gotten swept up into that profession without having any kind of like design background. All they do is just recreate Pinterest boards. The other limiting part about Pinterest is that it's so image forward. A lot of images that are uploaded have no context at all. I can't tell you how many times I've come across a fashion runway photo and then there's no caption for who the designer was or what year it was. And then I have to do a bunch of like reverse image searching to figure out myself. And then I find out it's AI. But you know, I'm doing this for fun. I'm not creating Pinterest boards for the sake of branding. But if this is your job and you're told to create a mood board for a brand, one of many that you might have to do before the end of the week, you may not care or you may not have the bandwidth to do a deep dive on every single photo that you're saving. But the end result of just taking images based on aesthetic value is running the risk of creating derivative, superficial work. In March, Gigi Hadid collaborated with Vogue on a fashion video where she lip-synced to You Can't Stop the Beat from the musical Hairspray. And apparently, Gigi had been cooking on this idea for a while, being a musical theater lover. I don't fault her for that, obviously. Nothing wrong with loving musical theater. But I think that it's so painfully ironic that she was cast as Amber Von Tussle, one of the movie's blonde skinny villains, when she actually performed the musical at age 9. Yet in this video, she's singing Tracy Turnblad's lines. Tracy, the protagonist, who's bullied for her weight by Amber because she's fat. Some parts are just not for you, you know? Like, I couldn't do Hairspray. I'm okay with that. There's so many other musicals to choose from. If anyone's doing Chicago. But I think casting someone who looks like Gigi, a very conventionally beautiful woman, to be the stand-in Tracy for this video is an absolutely superficial way to reference Hairspray. Because it's really just looking at and trying to copy the beautiful visuals of the musical. The early 60s dress silhouettes, the hairspray cans, the pastel set design. But it's ultimately missing the heart of what the musical was about. The heart of Hairspray is about the fight for racial justice and the fight against beauty norms set in place. It's about celebrating self-expression and individuality, a message that is lost when everyone in the video is like a size extra small. And it's even more harrowing given how Ozempic and diet culture are so prominent in entertainment right now. Also, no one was actually singing, and the musical phrases didn't flow nicely because they had to chop up the song so much to omit all the references to being fat. The whole thing just came across as like incredibly lazy to me.
Like you're just pulling these things from the shit you read, and you haven't thought it out for yourself. No bearing on the world around us, and totally unoriginal.
And speaking of laziness, I genuinely think a major reason for the lack of creativity is because we're so distracted all the time. David Lynch passed away in January, and for many of us film lovers, he was the epitome of a true creative artist. His first movie, Eraserhead, is a surreal black and white film that follows a man named Henry Spencer, whose girlfriend has given birth to some kind of worm child that is constantly shrieking during the film. It's eerie and weird and famously vague. In a viral interview from 2007, Lynch said,
Eraserhead is my most spiritual film.
Elaborate on that.
No.
And that's just the first of his movies. Like, he's known for this surrealist quality that he brings to cinema. And sure, there's still plenty of auteurs out there who are insanely creative. I don't doubt that. But I think it's definitely harder to be creative as an artist today with AI and social media offering so many easy, unoriginal solutions. I mean, David Lynch famously practiced transcendental meditation. He would make time to meditate twice a day in 20-minute intervals, and he's told numerous publications that he had never skipped a day since 1973. Thomas Flight published an essay on imagination in Hollywood recently on his Substack. He writes in it, "Some people have a more active imagination than others, but having space to imagine used to just be a natural extension of daily life. We're the first few generations that actually have the option of giving up the space that would have been used for imagining in the past." But it's a two-way street, right? David Lynch wasn't making a movie every year. And nowadays, if you're an artist, you're kind of expected to release something pretty constantly, like once a month, and then produce a million teasers in between. If you don't, people criticize you for falling off. So earlier this year, there's some online drama that started with a TikToker complaining about how New York City influencers are all the same. The TLDR is that they all are blonde and skinny and shop at Revolve. In the midst of the discourse, people resurfaced this Wall Street Journal interview with Shanna Davis-Ross, the CEO of Pontifirm, an influencer management company that many of these influencer girls are signed under. And the article basically exposes the fact that she helps curate these girls' feeds to look identical in order to be the most brand-friendly and therefore the most profitable. It sounds kind of like an industry plant model, but specifically for blonde girls of affluent backgrounds. The article describes her as a Dr. Frankenstein for the influencer marketing era. What she's fashioned isn't a monster exactly, but a woman with an algorithmically covetable Manhattan life. Her creation works out at Alo Yoga's invite-only gym, grabs afternoon Aperol spritzes with her girlfriends, dines at the hottest restaurants, and always seems to have a perfect blowout.
It's alive. It's alive.
More interesting to me than the fact that these girls are boring or taking up space on people's feeds, as the complaint was, is the fact that there was discourse about this in the first place. Because frankly, copying is the backbone of the creator industry. And also the creator economy has been oversaturated for a while now, so it's no surprise to me that there are more than like 5 influencers doing the exact same thing. For years, the Instagram account InstaRepeat made fun of repetitive content in the travel influencer community by collecting almost identical travel posts and reposting them in a collage. But I think that the upset in this scenario is indicative of maybe a cultural change. Maybe we all have a desire for freshness and to see something that's not too obviously manufactured and outside the optimized norm. I came across this YouTube video the other day that has almost 2 million views called How Trying Became Cool Again. And the creator of the video, Nathan Zed, points to music icons like Chappell Roan, Kendrick Lamar, Doechii as being artists who have tried very hard and become very successful and popular because of that effort. For example, after Doechii won a Grammy for Best Rap Album earlier this year, the internet resurfaced a YouTube video she posted 5 years ago. And in the video, she talks about how she had just gotten fired from her job and how she's going to try even harder now because now she has nothing to lose. And people responded to this video so positively because, especially in entertainment where it's overrun with nepo babies and industry plants, it's truly amazing to see someone who's been passionate and hardworking for so long finally get the recognition that they deserve.
This category was introduced in 1989, and 2 women have won. Lauryn Hill, 3 women have won.
So I think it's cool to see the beginnings of a cultural shift, but I also think that shift is unsustainable unless consumers also change their mindsets. We can't have the expectation that people are going to put out amazing, authentic work when we demand new content from them every week. Severance took 3 years after season 1 to put out season 2. And yes, there were strikes, but showrunners Dan Erickson and Ben Stiller were also really adamant about not rushing the creative process. Erickson said in an interview, "Ben and I worked together really closely on crafting the story, both at an outlining phase and then with the scripts. We were very adamant that we would not move ahead at any point until we really felt like we had it." Okay, editing note here. I do also want to recognize that corporations are very greedy and that even if public consensus is to slow down, they will probably keep pushing artists to churn out content at like impossible rates to make more money. In saying that, I think that we are all still like moving parts of a system. Some are bigger parts than others. And the bottom line is I think that it's very important to continue to support artists who are sticking to their artistic integrity, even if they're taking long breaks, rather than constantly moving towards like the new hot thing. I have to remind myself of these things because ever since I moved to Los Angeles, work has ramped up a lot for me. And I don't know what's in the air. I'm very grateful. But the downside is I'm on this hamster wheel that's going like super, super fast. And it's altered my understanding of success and how long realistically certain projects take. Like I've been trying to work on this book project for over a year now. Not consistently, mind you, but it takes up space in the back of my mind because I just can't find the time to write it. Like I'm busy writing essays every week, and then I've started auditioning more, and I'm in 2 acting studios at the moment. Like it's not that I'm procrastinating, I just have other obligations. You know, even though these obligations are also important to me, it's made me feel really guilty that I haven't had time to write this book, and I've just had to like sit and unpack that. Why do I feel pressure to complete all of these things literally in like a year. It's like I have a mental checklist for my life. Age 28, write book that becomes New York Times bestseller. Star in movie opposite James McAvoy. Travel to every continent. Age 29, build a house from the ground up. Star in second movie opposite James McAvoy. Get so good at tennis, I make the Olympic team. Age 30, go to space, run for Congress, achieve nirvana, etc. And then I'm like, oh, I feel this need to check off things because time moves so much faster when I'm on the internet. And success is also the currency of the internet. Like, I can chat all I want about trying, but ultimately, no one cares until you can flash your new house keys to the camera, or you can put out a deadline announcement that you're in the 84th Marvel movie of the year. But that's just not real life. We're not like constantly succeeding. And we're also not constantly having things to put out there. A lot of time should be spent on working on things. A lot of time is spent on working on things. Like Squid Game spent almost 10 years on the shelf before it got made. J.R.R. Tolkien worked on the Lord of the Rings series for about 17 years. Diane Wiss didn't get critical acclaim until she was 38 in the movie Hannah and Her Sisters. Toni Morrison didn't publish her first novel until she was 39 years old. Again, I do think that with figures like Doechii and Chappell Roan, who's also worked for years and years and been transparent about it, with them like rising up in the culture, it's changing the narrative a bit. And I am excited to see what lies in the future for arts and entertainment because, you know, I feel like it's like really bad right now, and I'm like, it can't get worse than this. So it's got to go up. Personally, as I go about my life now, I'm trying to care less about the when. I think deadlines are good to keep you motivated, but also they can backfire if you care more about finishing than actually like working on the project. What's that cheesy line? What's that saying? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And, you know, also, I think it's okay to fail and fail loudly. I'm not going to lie, like, since I started doing this improv class, it's been like a really big ego check. Like, I've never experienced ego death like this in my life. If anyone wants to experience ego death, definitely sign up for improv or do a stand-up comedy set. Like, nothing will humble you more. And nothing will also make you braver and be less fearful of failing. And you know what also? The thing about failing and failing loudly is it makes your comeback so much more powerful. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what's been inspiring you lately or what's been a roadblock lately. I really do like reading comments, even if I don't have the bandwidth to reply to all of them. But I think that there's so many interesting conversations that get put in the comment section of my videos, which I'm so thankful for. But for now, I'll see you next time. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.